It sounds like Karen Reed has been alleged of murdering her ex, and her defense is that she's being framed because the police are the ones that actually murdered her ex. So we're going to watch some videos, and you're going to be the judge. Is it a cover-up, or is it murder?
A big day on Monday, as you know, lots of forensic evidence coming in. What did you think after the day concluded?
Go ahead and click the like button below, and we can get it out to more viewers just like you.
Yeah. What stood out to me yesterday was the prosecution asking, I forget which scientist they had up there, and they asked, what was your conclusion in the undercarriage? Did you find anything? And he said, no, it was negative. So does that rule out him being dragged under the car, getting the scratches on his arm? Because we just heard that.
Have you ever seen a movie and the whole movie you're like thinking, okay, this is what's happening in the movie, this is everything that's going on, and then you watch the end of it and it's like one of those like domino effect situations, and then everything comes together at the end? That could be like this. Like, what if nobody killed him? Yeah, what if he was just like, whoa, that is crazy, that is so crazy to me. So what if like he got backed into, hit his head on a bumper, knocked him out, boom, snowplow comes through and he's already frozen, hypothermic or whatever, and that's what's actually the cause of death, and then that's how he suffers the scratches. I mean, what if there's no murder? What if there's just an assault? Like, what if they just beat the hell out of him and then that caused him to like pass out in the snow and freeze to death? So that's a homicide but not a murder.
And when she tested the undercarriage, I think she said the left tire, the right, and there was no evidence there. So again, and I told you from the beginning, Julie, I'm so stuck on these scratches. I was hoping that an expert can come and tell us how these scratches came about. Really, again, I'm just a layperson like you and Doc.
No, you're not. You're a law enforcement expert. Yeah, you've worked a lot of homicide cases. I know you're not a medical examiner. I know what you're saying.
I'm looking at this case as a juror. Without my expertise, they have to use, in these trials, y'all know common sense plays a big part in these jurors' mind also. The scratches, I really believe that it's going to be a problem for the jury unless we can get somebody to say, an expert, this is how that happened.
This police officer, I'm like, dude, I love this guy. And he's going, hey, these cuts, that's exactly how I felt about those cuts. I'm like, what? How can you see these cuts and be like, I have no idea where these cuts came from and it doesn't bother me at all? You know, as a jury, I'm sitting there going, that's probably the murderer. Now, how am I going to connect her to those cuts? I have no connection. I don't have any reference of her causing that damage. And so that bothers me. That if I'm watching this and I'm on the jury, I'm like going like, there's somebody out there that caused that damage. I want to know who it is. I don't think it's Karen. I'm guessing that's what they thought. They're going like, she couldn't have done that. Now she's not, he's a police officer. He's trained. He's probably has some experience with, hand-to-hand physical. He's not going to be able to probably create those kinds of damages without there being a huge issue, without it causing a huge scene and there being, kind of wounds or damage back and forth. I don't think that they said she had any defensive wounds. Well, what's going on with the vehicle? Well, they're saying, from what I'm hearing, is that she killed him with the vehicle. That's their theory. Well, the theory versus the evidence is not connecting because they're saying that there's no blood evidence underneath the undercarriage of the vehicle or any type of evidence that would point to him being under the vehicle. And then the question is, well, who put the hair there? Because if there's no evidence of, skull fragment or brain matter or whatever they're expecting to see on the vehicle, well, what's the hair doing there? Did it float through the wind and land on it? Or I think that's the problem that people are having. They're trying to figure out how there is a murder, but we have this practically pristine vehicle. And let's see if we can figure it out.
It was seen from some analysis that's been done that perhaps it was from the undercarriage, perhaps from a snowplow. I know that's Ted Rowlands' theory, that after he was hit and left, that perhaps because he was so close to the road, maybe a snowplow did it. Does that make more sense?
That makes sense if he was ran over by the snowplow. Remember, the snowplow got all of those, I don't know what you call them.
Sure. I know what you mean. Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe Ted Rollins cracked the case.
Medical examiners, have the training and expertise to determine what's caused by what, and they don't always have the answers. Many of the most brilliant medical examiners, and I've been fortunate to, interview some of them, namely Dr. Cyril Wecht, they'll tell you, sometimes they can't figure things out, and they often have to correlate, which is good to do, the case evidence that police are gathering with what the ME said, looking at John O'Keefe's body and how this may have occurred. Dr. Sue, your thoughts on that? I felt like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I just think they're struggling to notice where these scratches come from, and if they are from someone's nails. I mean, women have long nails, not me, but you do. It could be from the snowblower. I was just thinking about that because underneath are those rivets, as my colleague said, and they could have went like that. I don't know. This is the problem with this case. We just don't know. It could be so many different things, Julie.
Looking at this case, and of course, I'm looking at the evidence. I'm not paying attention to the noise from people who knows who they are, and they're writing.
So let's go there. So we need to know what time the snowplow got there, because he was likely buried. If the snowplow ran him over, he was likely buried. And the snowplow couldn't see him. And then the snowplow caught him and just caught the arm, and then I'm not really buying the snowplow theory either. Well, no, he wouldn't be dead. He wouldn't have died from the snowplow. He would have been already dead. But when the snowplow, if he was ran over by a snowplow, I'm thinking of Jeremy Renner. So Jeremy Renner's kid was like going to get run over by a snowplow, and he like pushed the kid out of the way and got ran over himself. Some kind of like superhuman move. He was destroyed, just crushed, and I think, huge problem, just barely survived. But this seems like they just had scratches. Possible, but man, seems more likely there would have been a lot more damage if he got ran over by a snowplow. That makes more sense. So it could have just caught him and then pushed him to the side. Interesting. That would make total sense why the shoe was buried. The snowplow came around at 3 in the morning, 3:30, whatever it was. Do you want to hear my reasonable doubt story? Okay. You've got a cat and a mouse in a room. You put the mouse in a box. You come back, there's no mouse. There's a cat, and there's no mouse. There's just no mouse. So you do the experiment again. You come back, and there's a cat, and there's no mouse. Well, at this point, you're thinking the cat ate the mouse. So you do the experiment again. You look, and you see there's a cat, and there's no mouse. But on the side of the box, you see a hole. And that hole is reasonable doubt. It might have been the cat, or the mouse could have escaped. And people love that story because it's like, who does not know Tom and Jerry? It's so clear. And you take it and you put it in a room, and you put a box in the room, and you do the experiment. And it's very clear for people to understand, like, we can assume that the mouse was probably eaten by the cat, but we don't know for sure. And we're not going to throw the cat in jail for the rest of its life if we don't know. We need more. We need more evidence. And that's what we have in this case. Okay, this one's pretty good. I like these people. Okay.
Crazy things and a lot of disinformation, and looking at the evidence yesterday, one of the biggest things came out in court that debunked some disinformation out there about the idea that investigators somehow broke her tail light and took pieces of it and planted it at the scene. Her vehicle was en route to being impounded at the time that all of this. What did you think when you heard that? And I know you've heard the disinformation too. You're active on Twitter. When you're hearing this lieutenant testify about how his CERT team recovered multiple pieces of broken taillight right there in the vicinity where Officer O'Keefe was found.
Well, I thought, again, like you, I agree with you. I thought that was a big moment. And these are the moments we're looking for, to piece, the pieces of the puzzle to come together. And I thought that was a very big win for the prosecution to show that, hey, no, during the time that car was en route, we did recover these broken pieces of the tail light.
The defense theory, right? Their theory is that this was an impromptu homicide, that John O'Keefe went into that house to party and that people got mad at him and that 3 people beat him up and that they dumped him outside. And I was thinking about this. It was an impromptu homicide. And if they did beat him up and kill him or come close to killing him, they had no need to tie it to Karen Reed. Okay, and here's why. If that happened in the house and they were beat up, these are cops. They would know. They could very easily call 911, say, we were attacked first. We had to hit back in self-defense. Please come save this man's life. He's here in the house. There's no need to take him outside, try to connect him to her car, break her taillight, plant the pieces, take a hair, put it on the bumper. All of these, there's no need in the world to frame Karen Reed. If they did beat him up in the house because they're cops, they could lie for each other and say, I witnessed it, I saw it, he attacked us first, we've got witnesses, this is how it went down. There's zero reason in the world why they would need to frame her. So that hit me last night when I'm thinking about this. This is why this doesn't make sense to me.
I think she's right. I don't think that this was anybody's, I don't think that we have the full story. I don't think the prosecution's right. I don't think the defense is right. I just don't. I think that this anchor here is going like, I'm thinking about this, like, why would they pin it on Karen Reed unless they really were like Ocean's 11 plotting this out? That seems unlikely. But then the prosecution's, where's your evidence? We just don't know about the prosecution's theory either. They just haven't presented enough evidence to show that she did it. What does that tell me? Something else happened, and I don't think we got the full story. Mm-hmm. That's probably why the snowplow guy remembered, because he was probably like, that was weird. I think I just ran into something. And the snowplow guy's like, hey, it's in the road. He probably thought it was some kind of property and, somebody left it out. Yeah, it's 3:30. It's probably dark outside and he's just relying on his lights. And I don't know if you've ever drove, it's pitch black and it could have been snowing. I mean, there could have been a whole bunch of visibility issues where this, it was just too late. And then, even crazier, what if the snowplow guy was like, oh my gosh, I just hit somebody and then just kept driving? Whoa, plot twist. Obviously we're coming up with theories here. We just want to make it clear. We're watching this with you guys. We don't have any specialized information or evidence or anything like that. We're just going off of strictly these videos. I would never try to act like I have more information than the jury or the police or the prosecutor. They're going to have way more information than me. All we can do is weigh back and see what's going to happen with the next trial and if she's going to be found guilty or if they even do a retrial. Based on what happened, maybe they go back and look at the evidence and they go, this isn't worth it. We don't have enough evidence to convict.
What I think isn't helping Karen Reed, and let me be clear on this, is her demeanor in the courtroom. All right. Psychologically, I look at her and when they show her on camera, she's smiling or she's laughing or she's, not looking serious enough about what is going on. He was murdered. Did we forget that for a minute? So I think she needs to change up her demeanor here and really look serious about what is going on here. Mm-hmm. This isn't a show. It's a murder trial.
First of all, I want to say, I think that Karen's demeanor in the courtroom, I think she's being very, very serious, so much that she's not, she's cracking a smile here and there. But I think she's looking very, very serious, like she's taking it serious. I haven't even seen her smile, only when she's talking to her lawyers. That's for every once in a while. The
lady in the pink here, the psychologist, is trying to help her in the media, and really Karen Reed doesn't give a crap about the media as much as she gives a crap about those 12 people in the jury box. It's just facts. It's a fact that jurors watch the media. I mean, we tell jurors, hey, don't watch the media, but they do. They go home and they turn their TVs on and they just can't help it. And they, most of them are good and they don't do it because they know they're not supposed to, but there will be some jurors that are watching the media, and that one juror could sway the whole jury because they heard something about the media. They saw her smiling and laughing in court, and that's all over the media. And I think that's what the lady in the pink is saying, like, hey, she needs to probably cut that out because it's making her look bad in the media. The police officer here that's has been there or watching the trial, he's saying, I've been watching and she hasn't been like that in the trial. So it just is this this contrast of what happens in the media and what's the news story versus what actually happens in the trial. So they're taking different perspectives, and I'm loving his perspective.
And we know there were people in and out of that house. So let's start here with John O'Keefe, his cell phone data. You take a look at it. You had witnesses for both sides talking about John O'Keefe's GPS location information, his Apple Health data, his movements. Like, at the end of the day, the jury got an idea about what the data said about where John O'Keefe's phone was and what it was doing. Okay? It ended up with a little bit of a battle of the experts. But there was a good foundation built around John O'Keefe's cell phone. Great. He's the victim in the case. Karen Reed's the defendant. Phone calls from Karen's cell phone tracked her movements on the night of January 29th. They used this also to find surveillance video of her car. And we know when she got back to the house, when she hooked back up with the Wi-Fi. Like, they're using evidence to track her. They're using this evidence to track her whereabouts. So we're able to follow and figure out where she is and when she's there. Data from her car backing up. All this stuff was used to tell this jury, not through some witness who said, yeah, I saw her at this time, but data that says she is somewhere at some time. Well, what about the rest of the people in the house? There's a bunch of them. They all testified.
Whoa. Why is there so many people in the house? Are they throwing a party? Well, they're not tracking them per se. They're just using the data, their digital footprint, to see where they were retroactively. So when you ask me like questions like this,
At the end of the day, their testimony wasn't enough. Either the cross-examination or the direct wasn't enough to convince the jury one way or the other collectively. So isn't there some way that someone could help us track where all these people were and what they were doing in the hours in question? Well, let's find out. Joining me tonight, he's the best criminal defense investigator, Charles Middlestat, with us. Also joining us, the former head of the homicide unit in the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, Attorney Rick Grundy, and finally, criminal defense attorney, college instructor, author, Peter Ellikin. Great to have all three of you tonight, handpicked by me to be in this segment tonight. Charles, you know something about phone data. You know a lot. You're able to put people together, you know. Don't need to get into all that, but let me ask you, Charles, if you've got all these people in the house, most people have phones, as we sit here tonight getting ready for a new trial, is it possible, like logistically, I'm not going to get into the legal wrangling yet, but logistically, to find records from cell phone towers or somewhere else where you can help track the location of the other people who were in the house that night?
There certainly is, Vinny. And again, I didn't follow this case gavel to gavel, so I don't know the full scope of the testimony or the evidence in the case. But certainly what was available to both sides.
that sounds exactly like who we want to hear from. A guy who hasn't watched the trial. I haven't been following this case very closely, but I'm an expert on this, and so let's see if I can talk to you guys on the news about it. I mean, that even if that's true, why you say that? I mean, at least do a little research on it. You're going to be on court TV.
Was simply with a subpoena was the ability to subpoena every single individual's phone records, the call detail records, and also the geolocation data associated with those phones. And that's done simply with a subpoena. To a cell phone provider. It's very easy to determine the carrier for each individual subscriber that we're dealing with. And it looks like we're dealing with about 10 different individuals. And certainly the defense would have had access to that. They would have had the ability through their discovery powers to leverage that data. Now, as to whether those records would exist anymore or not, really it depends on the carrier. Each carrier has a different policy with regard to preservation, and so some of those records may still exist, some of them may not. But what you would be able to do, in addition to the geolocation data, and frankly, More important, I think, at this stage than the geolocation data associated with those individuals within the household is the call detail records. Because if something happened inside of that house, I suspect that there would have been a flurry of activity on those phones. You would see text messages. You wouldn't see the content because the content's not going to be within those call detail records. The content would reside on those phones, and you would actually need to have physical custody of those phones in order to image them.
Well, some of those phones have been destroyed, so they wouldn't necessarily be available. So some of let me ask you this. Let me follow up on something else. Is there any other way to track locations of cell phones in an area? Can you get data straight from cell phone tower records? Is there anything like that exist?
Well,
or is that the geo-fence stuff?
That's the geolocation. So again, when you're subpoenaing the call detail records, within that is the geolocation data. And so you have, it's broken into two categories. You have the cell tower data that you're referring to, Benny. And then in addition to that, you have historical GPS data, and there's a third segment, which is the engineering data, which often I just subpoenaed some AT&T records. And so I not only got what's called NELOS data, that's AT&T's proprietary historical GPS data, which is far, far more precise than cell tower data. Cell tower data, you get into propagation studies in terms of range and so forth. GPS can be accurate within 3 meters, not always, but it's far, far more accurate. It's not depending upon a tower. And then you also have this engineering data, which is also generally GPS-based, which is also incredibly accurate. And so between those things, it is very possible to very precisely place somebody there. Now, with all those phones, whether they, again, a lot of these phones don't exist, but at the time, certainly the prosecution, had they gone in there, had they actually done proper interviews, had they actually taken some of these phones into custody, or at least sought permission to look at them or questioned these individuals about whether anybody had taken pictures, shot some video. You know, we often do witness mining based upon getting a picture. We talk to a witness, hey, did you take any pictures that night? Yeah, I think I did. And then we get a photograph, and in the background, we're able to identify 3 or 4 of the people in the background. So there's more witnesses, and now we identified. Now we're broadening the scope of the witness pool.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Bottom line, with just tracking the location of everyone, whether they're moving in and out of the house, whether they're in the front yard, when they leave, can you do it without the phones? If the phones are gone, you can do it without the phones.
Well, you can place them in the general location. If you're relying on cell tower data, then you're going to be relegated to placing them in the general location.
Okay, but that may be enough in some of these instances. Rick Grundy, we sat through this whole trial.
Yeah, we don't know. Was that part of the trial? Why were some of the phones destroyed? It's hard to know. Was that the police officers' phones? Because that would go to the conspiracy. Was it the people who were inside the house? Were their phones destroyed? Because that would go to potentially a different issue. That would have been good information. I would have loved to seen the guy that was just talking about, hey, I've got all this information from the trial. I'm so up to speed on everything going on. And I've got this expert information about cell phone data. And here's how the two connect and how they relate to each other. Wouldn't have that just been great? Yeah, and I like how the interviewer from Court TV is like trying to get him to like give us some more things. Like, can you track their location if they don't have cell phones on them? Who doesn't have a cell phone on them, first of all? And then, secondly, what do you mean? I thought we already knew that all these people were in the house. Are we trying to locate other people that were not in the house? I thought this was already like something that they just talked about. I don't know. Let's keep it going because I need some more info.
It's very unclear about any movements of any of these people. It's unclear exactly what time they show up, when they leave. Is it incumbent upon the prosecution at this point to attempt to bring that evidence in? Because from his perspective, he wants to erase that reasonable doubt that was being raised and obviously was raised during the course of this first trial. Do you see this as an option in the second trial? What would stop him? Why wouldn't a prosecutor want to uncover as much truth as possible, which could, from his perspective, erase reasonable doubt of this so-called conspiracy?
When we moved into our home a year ago, we had a bug issue. One day I came across custody, and I am so thankful that I did.
I mean, this really is easy to do.
So I agree with the overall premise. More information is always better from the prosecution side because, I always tell young prosecutors the best thing you got going for you is that your job is to present the truth. Find the truth and present it. So more information is always better. But I think one thing that the prosecution erred in doing in the case was chasing down little landmines that were placed by the defense that we found out they couldn't follow up on what they said the jury was going to get to. Too much of the trial was spent on that. So I think, with respect to those individuals in the house, they all testified they were in the house. I'll defer to Charles, but my understanding of what's available at this point in time is not going to, if you could get Higgins and Albert and the young kid in the basement, alone, that would be great for the defense. But they're all in the house. You're not likely to get anything more precise that's going to swing the pendulum one way.
But let me
or the
tell you
other.
this: if they still have their phones, and they have Apple phones and they have Apple Health, and they're not walking up and down the stairs, and you can show their movements, you can show when they left. Why wouldn't the prosecution want that? Why wouldn't the prosecution get it and try to present it? He knows that he didn't succeed first time around. I mean, something's got to change. We know the public reaction to the evidence in this case. Something's got to change if the prosecution believes they're in the right here and they want to win.
I like the idea that Charles put forth with respect to, there's going to be scampering. I mean, if there's nobody leaving the house by the side door or the storm door or whatever it was that supposedly dragged this body out, obviously that's great for you. But again, you're disproving, which is important, but I'd want him to focus on proving. And to be honest with you, I don't know that information wasn't available as much as it wasn't presented in the strongest manner and in a most effective manner. If John O'Keefe never gets, that's where I would want to focus. If John O'Keefe never gets into the house, game over on the defense theory. That's it. It's done. He never approached that threshold. It just didn't happen.
Let me ask you, Peter Elkin, for the defense, legally trying to get some more of this information. This defense is different. They are not saying that they can't prove it. They're saying they run the courthouse steps saying she's innocent. She's absolutely innocent, and someone else did it, and we know who did it. Like, at this point, getting ready for a second trial, you just sitting back and just letting it roll, or are you going to be aggressive in perhaps trying to reinvestigate the case and try to get more information because you believe that your client is factually innocent? They've been using those words, factually innocent. So do you think they need to be a little more proactive so they can show this jury why you can't believe this prosecution theory?
Yeah, that's exactly what they should be doing. But here I'm going to play a little bit of a Mr. Negativity here about a little pessimistic about whether that information is available anymore. As we know, the phones of the people in the house, virtually every single one of them either deleted their phone or took their phone and threw out and destroyed the SIM card. So saying we'd like to go back, boy, that information would sure be valuable for us. That would that just made the parade may have gone by. That may not exist anymore. I know Charles had mentioned something about it'd be great to see even the communications or when they.
Okay, let me cut you up because I think there's
Turtle Boy, the illustrious Turtle Boy. Is he a streamer or some kind of a personality where online personality? It's kind of weird that everybody in the house either destroyed their phone or destroyed their SIM card or both. Well, the real question is, why would everybody in the house think to destroy their SIM card? Who is in the house? Is this police officers in the house? Is that where we're getting this conspiracy? Is this where Turtle Boy is going? There is something fishy going on here. Turtle Boy sounds like he believes her. Do you want me to get down to the real crux of this? And I think what everybody's saying, as far as experts and court TV in this situation, is saying, hey, look, everybody, the prosecution probably presented their case in a way that they said, hey, we're not going to make this about the police. Okay? We believe in the police. We're not going to make this about the police. This is about Karen Reed and whether or not she committed murder. So the police are not on trial. Karen Reed is on trial. And what these four folks are saying right here is that the Karen Reed has brought up to as a defense that the police are trying to cover up their own crimes. And so that flips the coin. And what these four gentlemen are saying is now we have an issue with the assumption that the police are not on trial, because there's a defense that's saying that this is potentially the police that did it. And that changes everything. Now we've got to go on the next trial on the offensive, trying to destroy that defense. And that's how these things work. And I think prosecutors are often very hesitant to try to prove that because they don't need to, first of all. And if they do, they might actually get into some kind of issue where there's a presumption that the police did it, and the prosecution doesn't want to have that happen. They want to, have this kind of, state relationship with the agency, not actually presenting something that would make the whole thing blow up in their face. So even if it's true or not true. So I think that's where these gentlemen are going for right now is, hey, just put the evidence out there. If we have the cell phone evidence or we know the location of these 10 people, then put it out there. If we know the location of John and we know the locations of Karen, then put it out there. But now they're going to have to. That's right. They didn't do that for this trial. But now in the next trial, they're going to have to prove that. Exactly. So we're not going to get into, was this police officer there? What's this police officer location? We're not going to, be essentially providing alibis for every single police officer unless we need to. Well, now, because there was a trial of, split on the jury, they might have to get into that. The jury might have thought, there was enough conspiratorial evidence. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I'm going for it, to show that this could have been a conspiracy. And that's a problem for the state. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting. What happens when there's another split jury on the second trial? Because they're probably going to be reluctant, even in the second trial, to put the state on trial, to put the state police officers in the middle of this, proving their innocence. The standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt for the defendant. And so if there's any kind of doubt in there, if they're thinking, well, maybe it was a police cover-up, and that creates some doubt in the minds of the jury, then Karen Reed can't be found guilty. So that's why they might have to clear all this up to remove any doubt that she was the one who did it. And that makes a very difficult decision for the prosecutor. Bring this forward with potentially another split jury because they don't prove that the police didn't do it. Well, they don't think that's their job and they don't think that the police are on trial, but they might have to if they really want to solidify this in the mind of the jury. And I think that's where they're going for. What these four gentlemen right here are saying that wasn't enough. You need to go the extra step in this because unfortunately there are some evidence, enough evidence to show that this is a possible legal defense and factual defense to her committing the murder. I think so. Okay.
One moment here that is significant, okay? This was a significant part of the case. The plow driver who testified. Let's take a listen so I can remind everyone what we're talking about here.
I'm already feeling it.
Still on my second one. It feels like a buzz. Like, it's hard to explain, but.
What time was it, to your best estimate, in terms of when you would have approached Fairview and Cedar Crest again?
3:15 to 3:30. At that point, I saw a Ford Edge on the side of the road.
Where was it parked on the side of the road?
In front of the Albert's house.
Where in front of the Albert's house?
By the flagpole.
All right, Charles, I'm going to go back to you. If it's 3:15, everybody supposedly left the party, but now someone's pulling up in a Ford Edge or parking a Ford Edge near where the body was ultimately found. How would you go about trying to figure out if someone is milling around at 3:15 at this point? Not the initial investigation, but right now.
Again, the cell phone records. The cell phone records are completely different than the phone extractions. Phone extractions are going to be dependent upon having access to the phones. If the phones are gone, they're gone. The records are the records. There's no way to interfere with those. You can't erase the records. There's no ability on a subscriber's part to manipulate the records in any way whatsoever. So if someone was engaged in texting between parties, if there was some sort of scurrying going on because there was an injury in the house or an incident occurred, again, it works both ways. So the absence thereof, it works in the prosecution's favor. The presence of activity amongst those 10 folks in the home would indicate, first of all, that would have been great for cross-examination. If you, as the defense, to be able to say, hey, I see you two people were texting, or you were texting this person, or you were making these phone calls. Here's a 2-minute phone call with so-and-so. What was that conversation about? What were you texting about? I mean, these are all the things.
In this case, it turned out to be a butt dial, they said. They claim mutual butt dials, a double mutual butt dial at 222. Yeah.
The main thing about the records is it has the ability to very positively timestamp certain events. And so with the geolocation data, like the plow driver there, you could timestamp his presence in that area.
How about the Ford Edge? If you know which Ford Edge it is, are the records related to the car company? Would they have anything? Is there any way to specifically locate a car like a Ford Edge?
There's connected car technology. I don't know if Ford Edge has that sort of sophisticated connected car technology where you could actually download from the EDR, the event data recorder. It might have some data in it. But again, I don't know how much law enforcement did with regard to nearby ring cameras, nearby surveillance cameras of
they couldn't find them. Nobody in the neighborhood had a Ring camera that was working, apparently. That's another problem in the case. All right, everyone stay where you are. This is why I invited them on. They know what they're talking about.
Let's talk about the plow. Let's talk about the plow driver. So he must have had some kind of feeling about this Ford Edge, because he probably doesn't remember every single car that he's ever seen on any driveway. He's a plow driver. He's just plowing driveways. Or not driveways, but plowing the streets, I would assume. And so he's just going through. Why would he know or remember that car specifically? Yeah, and so do we have more destroyed evidence? So the butt dial. What is going on with the butt dial? At 2:30 in the morning? Is that what they're saying? It was around this time? 2:30 is different than 3:30, okay? I don't know if you've ever tried to stay up till 3:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, as far as like just generally parties go, right? I mean, if you're up at 2:30 in the morning, you might be like about ready to head home or whatever. But 3:30, I mean, we're about talking about the next day. I guess it is just 1 hour, but in my mind, if you're up at 3:30 and there was a butt dial at 3:30, I mean, depending on where you live, sometimes I think like, I don't know, like I know in Italy, you eat dinner at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Oh, 3:30 might not be that like late, but for most places, there's nothing going on at 3:30 in the morning. You don't even got McDonald's open, in some places at 3:30 in the morning. Yeah, and that's super fishy too. Like you're on the jury and you're like, every Ring camera in the neighborhood wasn't working. No way. I mean, seriously? I mean, unless there was just no Ring cameras or whatever, it's like, that doesn't make no sense. I mean, come on. It's not that hard to keep your Ring camera operational. I mean, those things are pretty solid. I think that based on all the mounting evidence of fishiness, all destroyed evidence and butt dials and Ring cameras, it just seems to be mounting of, for me, understanding why the jury was deadlocked. Okay, I think we're moving on, and I'm going to try to find a video that discusses the crime scene specifically, now that we kind of have heard some of the issues that the jury might have been dealing with during the trial.
The killer or cover-up trial.
In the Karen Reed.
I want to.
The views and opinions expressed in.
I want to bring in Dana Kennedy. She's a senior reporter at the New York Post and has been covering this case very closely. People probably, Dana, don't understand what that humor was defending. Is this sort of a dirty word to suggest, well, I'm not a baby? The killer or cover-up.
Can't go
do this to clear out stuck poop fast. On June 17th in 2019, my mom was rushed to the hospital to have what was basically
I want to bring in Dana Kennedy. She's a senior reporter at the New York Post and has been covering this case very closely. People probably, Dana, don't understand what that humor was about, but he used sort of a dirty word to suggest, well, I'm not a baby. I'll go out in a blizzard if that's what you're accusing me of. It wasn't that he was laughing at murder. I want to make sure everybody realizes it's a very serious case. But this business of the evidence collection, what the heck happened in the courtroom when they started to suggest that blood evidence was collected in party cups and put into used shopping bags that were left open and transported back to the cop shop?
Well, this, as you pointed out when you started talking about this has the air of, the Three Stooges or the Keystone Cops doing a police investigation. I mean, we've been at this. There have been 22 witnesses for the prosecution so far, Ashley, and they seem to be more like witnesses for the defense. They've only really been good for the defense. Nothing here makes any sense. Putting blood in Solo cups in a Stop and Shop bag, blowing the evidence area away with a leaf blower. Ashley, this sounds crazy, but it's almost as if they're not even trying to put forth a good prosecution. They're just almost doing this as if it's okay if Karen Read is acquitted, because that actually could save the cops that the defense thinks are guilty. You following me here? Because if she doesn't get convicted, really, that's a conspiracy theory within a conspiracy theory. At this point, given how this is playing out, you can't blame me for thinking that.
It's super backwards, but I get it.
So what is that? They're saying that she is on... Yeah. But what was the last thing that she said? That there's a conspiracy within a conspiracy? It sounds like she's saying that the police want her to be found not guilty. Right, but when they are... But they're saying they're thinking that when they are collecting the evidence. That they're going to frame her, but she's going to be found not guilty. So then everybody gets off because nobody knows what's going on. That's what she's saying about conspiracy within a conspiracy. And she's like going, how could we not think that? Because they did such a bad job collecting the evidence. I mean, some of these things make no sense. I mean, red Solo cups is how they collected the blood. I mean, there's not going to be contamination with other DNA inside the red Solo cup. We hope. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's an approved scientific method of how to capture blood for a crime scene. Seems like it wouldn't be. And then using a leaf blower. There's the leaf blower. We're looking at it in the photograph. What are they doing with a leaf blower? How's that going to help them collect evidence? They cleaning up? I mean, I didn't hear anything about how that made any sense. So let's just keep it rolling on that, because I got to hear more.
Today, it seemed like there was a lot of give and take. I mean, here we were looking at leaf blowers and Solo cups with evidence, but at the same time, there was some, I think, strong evidence. Prosecutors had texts and voicemails, apparently, that showed that their relationship was on the rocks. And I think that John's niece was in court saying that they fought a whole bunch, that he had tried to end the relationship repeatedly. How strong was all of that, though, given all the other stuff that we've been seeing that seems to, sway in Karen Read's favor?
Yeah, we've obviously known about the texts and the emails and the calls before and after that evening, or that early morning hour, I should say. I don't think that has as much sway, considering how many witnesses, including people that were at those two bars in Canton the night this all happened, all said they seemed very lovey-dovey. There was no bickering. I mean, you definitely can have a tumultuous relationship that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to end in murder.
No, and I think most people watching, would say that, except for if a lawyer is suggesting that, and you're on a jury panel, and it's made out to be a bigger narrative than perhaps it is. But fascinating. I'm going to have you back because the case isn't over yet, and it's getting close. So thank you, Dana Kennedy. Appreciate it as always. And now I want to bring in Phil Waters. I love Phil as well because he is a retired homicide detective in Houston who's investigated more than 400 homicide cases. So I am curious to get your take about the Solo cups and the used grocery bag and the failure to close it, leave it open, carry it back to the station open. What do you make of that?
Well, good evening, Ashley. This is quite a story here you've got me on. I tell you what, I look at all of these cases objectively, and I will tell you, in this particular case, I've watched some of the testimony, and I have kind of followed how this thing is starting to play out. And you got to go back to the beginning on this kind of stuff. So Lieutenant Lank, who was the detective at the time with Canton PD, that makes that scene, and he calls the state police, and they are the ones that are supposed to investigate an unattended death. And they say, we're not making the scene. We're not going to process the scene. And evidently that department is so small that they do not have the capability or the resources to process a scene properly. So given that, he
hate wearing bras, then you might want to check this out.
I hate regular bras. I'm a 34 Triple D. This bra, it's the best. Seriously, the most comfortable bra.
Thinks outside of what he's not able to do and comes up with a way to gather some evidence, to recover some evidence. And so he goes to the neighbor apparently and gets these red Solo cups. Now, I think that's pretty inventive. I would never be in a situation like that, but that was pretty quick thinking on his part to retrieve some blood evidence out of snow that is going to melt. So he puts it in the cups. Now, the only problem I see with the Solo cups is that he didn't put covers on them. And were they used or were they fresh out of the package? So that would be my only question there. Now, in regards to putting in the paper bag, even if they'd have had the proper plastic containers to recover that stuff, that evidence is going to be put in a paper bag. It doesn't matter if it's got a grocery store on the front of it or the Canton PD in front of it. So that part of it, not a big deal. Now, the fact that he didn't seal that bag up, that's a problem in terms of gathering evidence. So I would agree with you there. But in terms of gathering the evidence with the resources that he had, I think there's some quick thinking on his part.
So this is a different perspective where they're saying that they have no way to process a scene, but he thought that this blood evidence would be destroyed. So he thought, I'm going to get some of this blood evidence, capture it, because nobody else is going to be able to get here in time to do it before the snow melts, and then the blood goes to the ground, seeps into the ground, and then, what do you do at that point? You would think he would have covered it, but he was probably going, hey, I'm doing a pretty good job. I'm doing the best I can do. Now, I will say, with this blood evidence, is this kind of all for nothing? Because, this man got murdered. There's a crime scene, and there's blood. Whose blood do they think it's going to be? I'm sure it was his blood. Well, who did we think the blood's DNA was going to come back to?
You make a really good case because, look, not every murder has, perfect evidence. You get what you can get when you can get it. And as far as the ingenuity goes about blood evidence in the snow that's going to melt, I do get it as well. But that also doesn't mean that in court it needs to be accepted. It doesn't mean it's great. It's okay, especially since that grocery bag was used, right? And the Solo cups, like you said, we don't know the chain of custody on those. We don't know if they'd actually, but they weren't cups from inside the party house. And that's important because inside the party house, there are all sorts of allegations by the defense that the real killers beat him up and threw him out in the snow and are trying to frame Karen Reed. Do you think, listen, Phil, I get it. It sounds crazy when anybody tries to suggest that there's a big cop conspiracy cover-up. It's usually ridiculous. This is one of those cases where it really seems to line up and it doesn't sound so unreasonable. Do you agree?
Well, no, I'm going to use your word. Again, I follow evidence. I don't follow conspiracy theories, and I don't follow what other people are saying, and I don't follow commentary. So I would say that the conspiracy theories that have been thrown into this thing, to use your word, are ridiculous. And what I think the problem the prosecution has is that, and what I've watched of the trial, the witnesses, and I'm talking about the police, I've watched some of their testimony, and look, I'll be frank, it's abysmal. It is not very good. And it is painting this picture that these guys are so complete in their incompetence that that's a distraction for the prosecution. And the defense is jumping on that, and they're taking all of these facts, but they're not leading to the truth. And so, and
yeah, I keep coming back to the taillight. There's a photo of it, and it looks like it's intact when she leaves. And so I keep coming back to that to start me on the process of how could that. But that's for another day, Phil Waters. Thank you for watching.
What I think Phil is missing here, because I think Phil is like, hey, I was in law enforcement for 33 years or whatever it was. And so, I'm going to lean towards that. And what Phil is missing is that doesn't matter. We're not picking teams here. The question is, do the conspiracy theory, okay? I don't know if that's the proper terminology in this context, but, is her defense, the police having this cover up to frame her, does it present reasonable doubt for her in her case? If that is the case, then it's done. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if the police, actually did it. It was the evidence presented in such a way that the police have looked so incompetent that it was possible, because that could create reasonable doubt. And so that's the defense's theory. The defense, it's not their job to prove that, this is a true factual situation where there was an actual cover-up. The question is, was there enough evidence presented to, in the jury's mind, create reasonable doubt? And Phil, I know he's looking out for his boys and the police side of it, and maybe they didn't do it, but that's really not the question. Which is what I think the anchor here is getting to, is in her mind, she's going, well, there's enough evidence. Most of the time it's crazy, but in this case, there's enough evidence to make you go, huh? Really? This has happened here? Well, how am I going to take any of the other evidence to be true when I can't get over the fact that the taillight wasn't broken and they said it, that it should have been. The fact that the evidence wasn't collected correctly. The fact that they're blowing, evidence away from the crime scene so that the defense might not be able to look at it, or whatever the string of evidence issues were. That is the problem, and that's why, this anchor is probably feeling the way she does. Well, I think the question that Phil's trying to present is, was the police innocent, or did they commit the murder? And he's trying to say which line of the fence he's on. And for our purposes, or for everyone's purposes, that really doesn't matter. The question really is she innocent or is she guilty? No, that's not the question either. The question is there reasonable doubt created by her defense of this being a cover up by the police because somebody in the house was actually the one who beat them up? Now, I don't understand the connection between the police and the people in the house. He was obviously on the police force, so maybe that's the connection, because she's saying that somebody else did it. And it's interesting, and so the question becomes not, did somebody do it in the house? Because that's not who's on trial. The police are not on trial. The question is, is there enough fishiness going on with the taillight should have been broken, but it wasn't, or the red Solo cups and the evidence wasn't collected correctly, and they're blowing off, potential evidence with the leaf blower at the scene. All of these things adding up to the question in your mind, like, was she innocent? And if there's a question in your mind like that, then there's likely going to be reasonable doubt. And then they can't find her guilty. I think that's exactly why they didn't find her guilty. They found her not guilty, or deadlocked, which is, the same and from her perspective. And they probably did this because all of these things lining up and making them question, is this conspiracy that would usually be a conspiracy not actually a conspiracy? Did it actually happen? That's the question. And was it and I think conspiracy is actually, it's a legal term for, conspiring, and it's essentially acting in concert together, right? And so there's these two kind of competing definitions of the term conspiracy, and they both sound like they apply here, potentially, right? Where you have this kind of like this would typically be kind of a, like this anchor said, hogwash. Typically the police are not, actively going out there and trying to frame people. But this situation, it's like, well, what is going on here? Why are all the kind of the things lining up here making us question it, when usually we're going like, no, that's just BS or whatever you want to say. So that's what we got going on here. Not only the police acting potentially against her, but then we actually have enough evidence to make us question that in our minds. And that question in your mind, that's reasonable doubt. That's what the jury's thinking in their heads. That was perfect.
In the Karen Reed case in week 3.
The killer or cover-up trial. The defendant is this woman, Karen Reed. She is a professor and was the girlfriend of the case victim, a man who was a Boston police officer for 16 years, Officer John O'Keefe. Let's take a look back at how Monday's testimony went.
I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight. Same location. Generally, it was in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. The sneaker was flush up against the curb and it was upside down. I think we had found one piece of taillight prior to the sneaker. And then after we found the sneaker, we found a few more additional pieces of taillight. The sneaker was completely buried. It wasn't until we started digging through the snow that we found the sneaker.
Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south of the black sneaker, which was found 3 feet south of the red piece of plastic? Did that happen?
I don't know the distance, sir. No, not without measuring it. But I wouldn't think it was that far of a distance. They were much closer than that.
I mean, you said you don't know the distance, but you testified to what the distance was in that prior proceeding, did you not? And then, moving along, we have the red piece of plastic, black sneaker, a few feet, several of that clear piece of it. Was there a second of red several feet south?
No, again, I don't agree with your description of the distance, sir.
Oh.
I was informed that this vehicle may have been involved in hit and run, so I was requested to examine it for biological material. I was informed that the victim had scratches on his arm, as well as the fact that the car had been towed through a blizzard. I performed blood screening on the lower lying areas of the undercarriage, on each side of the tire flap, as well as the edge of the bumper and the exhaust pipe.
And what were the results of that testing that you?
Those were negative. I observed the apparent glass on the rear bumper.
Are you able to tell from your examination of those fibers and of those clothing materials sort of what caused those tears and cuts?
No. As far as the sneakers, given their dark color, I did not see any visible red-brown stains on the black area of the sneakers, so I used an alternate light source to aid in visualizing any potential blood on those sneakers. With that alternate light source, I tested several stains on the sneakers, one of which screened positive for blood.
With respect to the other clothing items that you were talking about doing the screening test and the confirmatory test for blood, with respect to the gray sweatshirt, the orange T-shirt, and the jeans, what were the results of that screening test and that confirmatory test that you ran with regard to each of those two?
The screening test and the confirmatory test were positive.
Pieces that you had sort of put together, what, if anything, were you able to do with regard to some of those pieces and the tail light housing item 3-1?
The items that we just saw I was able to piece one larger piece with many of those pieces all fit together into one piece that I then called piece 1. There were some other pieces that also fit together among those question ones that I called pieces 2, piece 3, piece 4, and piece 5. Piece 1 was a physical match with items 3-1.
Okay. Yeah. Why is there so much emphasis on the shoe, the taillight, blood on the shoe, sneaker? Why does it all matter? I think they mentioned something about the basement and those individuals being down in the basement. But why is there so much info? What am I trying to say here? On this specific evidence. And I'm guessing they're trying to say that this is how we're pinning it on Karen Reed. And then everybody's going, what? Well, it connects to her because they're saying that this taillight came from her car. But then I heard that there was some evidence of a video of her driving away, which, where's that video? But anyways, and her taillight's not broken. So then everybody's like, what's going on? The reasonable doubt just keeps growing, you know, and I guess the sneaker, it seems pretty clear to me like there could be a connection between that sneaker being kicked, breaking the taillight, and then causing a cut on his foot. It's a male sneaker, I'm assuming. I'm guessing it's the victim sneaker, so, which could be like, hey, did this sneaker being kicked, boom, cause his injury, cause the blood, and then did that make somebody mad and that's why they beat him up? Okay, maybe that's a theory. Maybe I just cracked the case. Okay, so, but we don't know. And what did we think about those injuries to his arm? What is that? Yeah, that does not look like self-defense. And here's what really bothers me about what she kept saying is like, she didn't know nothing, right? And I guess, you know, forensics, it's not like CSI on TV where you're just like, this was caused by the unilateral movement of this person causing, you know, the glass being broken from the window over here. Like, they can't pinpoint it like precisely. But to have no idea or guess, you know, based on the actual wounds, it seems unlikely. Now, I'm still trying to figure out, how did she kill him? I mean, what's the prosecution's theory? Are they saying that it was a hit and run and she ran him over, and so that they didn't find any blood on her vehicle? So it's fascinating. I mean, it just is like, give me some hard evidence that can point to this. Jurors usually reach a verdict. The jury, how long do they get? The judge will encourage them to wrap it up, but usually there's no time limit on how much and how long they get to deliberate. Yeah, usually the deliberation is like, the main factor is these people want to go back to their lives. That's the main driving factor for a verdict. So they don't want to just sit there in days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months. At some point, they're going to say, hey, we got this figured out, or hey, we're never coming to a resolution. We're deadlocked. To reach a verdict, typically you need a 100% situation if it's a murder. Fascinating. I will be interested to see the second trial and how that all shakes out. Hopefully there's a lot more evidence, because maybe there's no conspiracy at all. Maybe it is just a domino effect of what that happened on that night. Maybe that's an alternative theory. So when you have these things, it's like, is Karen Reed going to be found guilty in the second trial? Well, you have all these things that are coming up. You know, she's trying to have a defense for, you know, hey, you know, they were actually the ones that beat him up and that caused his death. Maybe in some way that did happen. And maybe it's like, just in my brain, if I'm thinking maybe that's what happened, that's enough. That's reasonable doubt. If you want to see more True Crime with Lawyer Cliff, go ahead and click the video right over here, and True Crime continues.